Good morning, Suncoast. God of the impossible, you know my name, you know my story, and no mountain could ever stop the plans you've made. Your heart is for me. Let's lift it up. I believe in your name, or miracles can happen. I believe in your name, or miracles can happen. Yeah! And the blind will see, the sick will stand. Sing hallelujah with confidence. When we can love, your mercy waits. Sing hallelujah and live again. When the lights from every side say you're done, to say it's over, I remember the 1,000 times your love has won, and this is far from over. I believe in your name, miracles can happen. I believe in your name, miracles can happen. Yeah. The blind will see, the sick will stand. Sing hallelujah with confidence. When we can love, your mercy waits. Sing hallelujah and live Let's sing out this truth. Jesus, Jesus, your love is breaking chains right now, right now. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, there's hope found in your name right now, right now. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, your love is breaking chains right now, and nothing can stop you. Jesus, Jesus, there's so
something that won't be. Show me your heart, 'cause I need a father. Show me your love, 'cause I just need a place I can run and fall into the arms of my father. I just need to know there's someone
left home to find my way. There my feet had found a rhythm, and my worries seemed to fade. Oh, with battered boots and shallow roots, nothing held me still. Just scattered pursuits of myself, values what I want, still part of your will. And lean into all my wants and wishes, and lean into my thoughts and wildest dreams, holding on to all my heart's desires in this reckless pursuit of me. And every single line like casting shadows seem to read these words I often think. Holding my breath till my heart expires. Is this the place I've longed to reach? In this reckless pursuit of me. And oh, I lean in. And oh, I lean trembling flow right inside my hunger led me further from satisfied. But this grace that you are still shines in my heart as I stand in this divide. There's a light out in the distance, a voice that carries far. I'm in all the stars, you are all in my heart. No one will still shine in the dark. Lean into all my wants and wishes, lean into my thoughts and wildest dreams, holding on to all my heart's desires in this reckless pursuit of me. And every single line like casting shadows seem to read these words I often think. And holding my own breath till my heart expires. Is this a place I've longed to reach? In this reckless pursuit of me. Oh, I lean in. Oh, I lean in. Oh, I lean in. Oh, I lean boundlessness, you found this mess, you saw me here within it. The same road I walked is the road you run to welcome me home again. Maybe the space that I made was to measure your grace. It still stretches out beyond to every fading heart in the worlds they part. You shine away home again. And as your tears fall and my fears fail, your love still stands to hold. And every tower against love's embrace is broken, leaning to hold. And as your love lives to carry on, this light will shine through every time to
There is a light, burns brighter than the sun. He steals the night and casts no shadow. There is hope. Should oceans rise and mountains fall, he never fails. So take heart, let his love lead us through the night. Hold on to hope, take courage again. And if by love the fallen world was overcome, you erase the scars of our freedom in his name. All our fears are swept away, he never fails. So take heart, let his love lead us through the night. Hold on to hope and take courage again.
World and its troubles, take heart, God has overcome. All the world and its troubles, take heart, He has overcome. All the world and its troubles, take heart, for God has overcome.
All the world and its troubles, take heart, for he is overcome. All the world and its troubles, take heart, for God is overcome. All the world and its troubles, take heart, for he is overcome. All the world and its troubles, take heart, for God is overcome. All the world and its troubles, take heart, for he is overcome. All the world and its troubles, take heart, for God is overcome. All the world and its troubles, take heart, for he is overcome. All the world and its troubles, take heart, God is overcome. All our heartache, all our pain, God our healer, he has overcome. God our refuge, God our strength,
higher than the world could understand. Foolish as the cross, humble as the grace you give, the wisdom of a kingdom made to last. 'Cause I don't wanna build this life on Babylon's bricks and pride, sitting on a fault line, bound to quit. I'd rather be a bedrock who trusts in nothing less than you, when every other sure thing surely fails. And lead me to the right, lift me from the sinking sand. I'm sorry for the junk I took for grace. Don't let it take a fall to bring me to my knees again. But if it's what I need, I'll take my place. Come on, lift this up. 'Cause I don't wanna build this house with rubble from the same old ground, sitting on a fault line, bound to quake. I'm begging on a rolling frame, the bedrock of an empty grave, when every other sure thing surely fails. And Lord, through it all, through the wind and the storm, on this rock I'll stand. And empires may fall, pillars fail, people fall, but your love still stands. Come on! And age after age till the earth fades away, still your kingdom stands. Name above name, Jesus, I need your grace, 'cause my world's gone So, guys, let's give him one more shout of praise. Come on. Thank y'all so much for singing out with us this morning. Y'all may be seated.
Good morning. So good to see you. You guys are so kind and embarrassing. So, if you're watching today online, thank you so much for tuning in around the country and around some people even out of the country, and some people local. Appreciate you tuning in as well. And thanks for those who come here today when I suggested that, so you know who you are. I appreciate that as well. So a lot of good things are happening today. We're doing something we haven't done for a long time, and that's a beach baptism. With COVID and everything that happened, it's been a few years since we've had a baptism. So today, if you've never been baptized, you want to be baptized, we're doing that at Siesta Beach at 6 o'clock at the yellow lifeguard stand. So it's really, you can sign up at Grand Central, or you can sign up when you get there. It's not, they just put your name on the list so we can call your name. And if you get baptized, one of the perks is you get wet. And for those of you who are heavy sinners, we hold you under longer for the more sin you've committed. So we have snorkels available, no problem. So the reality is we celebrate baptism because it's traditionally one of the ceremonies of the church. But it really, what it does is signify I'm part of this community. And the life of God lives in me. And if Jesus was baptized, then I want to be baptized. So it's not necessary for you, to be baptized. But if you want to be, it sure is a cool thing to do. So that's going to happen at 6 o'clock, Siesta Beach, this afternoon at the yellow lifeguard stand. So that's coming. So today I want to talk to you about the signs, the 7 signs. What are the 7 signs? What are we talking about? They're only found in the Gospel of John. And they're really miracles, but John calls them signs. It's even thought in some scholarship that there was a book of signs that were attributed to Jesus, and John pulled those into his writing. But there really are miracles with a purpose. So that miracles that were delivered so that Jesus' disciples would have an education about what was coming. Each of these signs were lessons for his 12 guys to remember to lean into these signs, lean into the source of strength, that it's really a training that they're getting on the job, because Jesus was only with them how long? 3 years. And they're going to be trying to live out this Jesus culture, this spirit life for their lifetimes, and Jesus pouring into them. So the signs, John shows us, the signs really were lessons, just intensive classes, so they would understand what it's going to mean for them in the future. So let's look at the signs so far. I'm going to sum them up to you. You can go back online and watch these. They're all on our website or on YouTube under suncoastcommunity.com. But sign number 1, Jesus turns the water into wine. It was at a wedding. When John writes, you can read the surface and it's okay. But in the other Gospels, maybe so. But in John, there's almost always this underlying thread of truth and meaning. So it's not about the wedding. It's not even about the wine. But what he really is trying to teach his disciples, that when a crisis occurs, when you're out of resource, when you don't have the understanding, when you have problems or issues, come to Jesus. Go back to him. Search his heart and find out what you should do. No matter what happened to them in the next 5 to 20 years or more, the Spirit of Christ is their ultimate resource. Sign number 2, he healed the royal official's son. It's a great story. Is it about this physical healing? Yes, but what's the deeper meaning? Really, that Jesus didn't even have to be there. Just go back, your son is healed. And what it taught his disciples, that we don't always have to be there. So remember, the Spirit of Christ is so dominant. Miracles can happen and lives can be changed without even the physical necessity of being there. Sign number 3, Jesus heals a lame man at the pool of Bethesda. Despite the many years of the religious system, how long have you been there? 38 years. How many colonnades? 5. Representing the Torah, the 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. What Jesus was trying to do and what John shows him doing is that there's a religious system that keeps people crippled, because people of all kinds of infirmity were there. Those who had all kinds of issues, they stayed under the bondage of these 5 colonnades. And Jesus offers healing and freedom to them. And even when he does, they complain because he does it on the Sabbath. And you can kind of see John saying, it's not the system. And sign number 4, he feeds the 5,000. It's the miracle of multiplication. And last week, Brett and Troy did a great job teaching about this. But when everything is placed in God's hand for distribution, the community needs are met. And that's the great truth. It's underlying truth. So today we're going to look at sign number 5. There's going to be 7 total. Number 5 today. And I think this is a challenging sign to teach, but let's see how it goes. John chapter 6. After the people saw the sign, again, that Jesus performed, they began to say, this is the feeding of the 5,000. After they saw the sign, the feeding of the 5,000, let me read it. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world. Jesus, knowing what they intended, that they intended to come and make him a king by force, he withdrew again to a mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and they set off across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they'd rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. Another version says scared out of their minds. Another one was scared senseless. Another was terrified. But he said to them, it is I, don't be afraid. Now, grammatically, it should be, it is me. Why doesn't it say it that way? I'm going to tell you in a little bit. It is I, don't be afraid. Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. The next day, the crowd that had stayed on the opposite shore of the lake realized that only one boat had been there and that Jesus had not entered it with the disciples, but they'd gone away alone. This is detail. Then some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. And once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, Rabbi, when did you get here? And Jesus basically asked that question, when did you get here? And there's lots of response. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But this is a well-known story from the Bible. I've read it many times. I've read all the different versions of it, but John is uniquely different. Remember that John has this underlying meaning. There, John's way of telling the story of walking on the water is different than the others. I would say it's a deeper story, play on words. You know, John tells about Jesus walking on the water. It's not a story to show us that Jesus can do miracles. It's not even a story to show us that Jesus had amazing power. John is telling this story as a sign to open the eyes of those closest to him, to build confidence in the 12 for what was going to come ahead, so that they'd have a new understanding, to show them and us that the religious system of that day was without power and the energy that gives life. Several times, John, in this passage, he refers to Moses. Now, when I was in school in 1974, that's a long time ago. Graduated in 1974. You can figure out how old I am if you're smart. If you're not, I'm 66. But in 1974, I went to college. And the first year of college, I sat down and a theologian was there, and he said, yes, we're talking about Jesus and the story of Jesus, and it's called the Recapitulation Theory. And I go, what is that? Who even wants to know about? And then they said, well, it's a lot easier if you just remember this. Jesus recaps a lot of things that Moses did. Now that sticks with a young guy. It even sticks with an old guy. So in their enthusiasm, so what are all the things that Moses did that Jesus did? Well, he just mentions a few of them. In their enthusiasm, it said, they were about to make him king, and so he slipped off back up onto the mountain to be by himself. And a good Jewish guy would say, just as Moses went up on the mountain by himself to pray and lead the people, so did Jesus. So they both had this similarity going on top of the mountain. The second reference is when he walked up to them in the dark and they were terrified. So just as Jesus terrified the disciples, the people also were terrified when Moses came down from the mountain because he was glowing with the presence of God. And Moses on Mount Sinai, he said, who shall I say sent me? And the voice from the burning bush said, and you know this, I am. Tell them I am. It was such a sacred name that Jews would not say it. So when the disciples were frightened in the boat and Jesus came out on the water and he says, it is I. I would think, it's me. You numbskulls, it's me. But what he says is, the Greek words are ego eimi. There's 7 times in the New Testament in John that Jesus uses the term ego eimi. Translated, I am. He walks up to them and they're terrified and he says, I am. And they invite him into the boat. See, we don't get that in the English version, do we? It's just a little more hidden there. So another reference to the story is when the people are looking for Jesus, and he says, you're looking for me just because you ate the loaves and you had your fill. And it begins this discussion of Moses fed them manna, Jesus feeds the 5,000. So you see all these recaps, these similarities, because John wants us to see how Jesus was more than Moses. Moses was the great leader, the prophet. John will say, hey, Jesus did everything that Moses did and more. When they saw Jesus walk on the water, you know what they weren't meant to think, hey, that's a cool trick. That's not what they thought at all. What they thought is, who is it that defies my understanding and comes to me in my helplessness? I am terrified. The story of Jesus that walked on the water is meant to show that the Spirit of Christ will overcome any obstacle that comes against us. So, religion and spirituality. Something very uniquely different back then. The religion of the Old Testament, the Jews, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the spirituality of Jesus. Today, we can segue into that and say, you know, there's a lot of religion today in our culture. And the question is, where's the spirituality? Where is the life? Religion often says, I must give to God, then he'll give back to me. I must live a good life. This is religion. I make sacrifices. I do certain rituals or behaviors to manipulate God and get him to accept me. I must give to God to make God happy. Now you say, well, that's not exactly what it says, but that's really what's behind the scenes. In its place, Jesus boldly brings a new understanding, which says God, or the Spirit of Christ, is always near and always loves me as I am. Those are different things. The disciples didn't fully understand the new message Jesus was bringing to them that day because they were so used to the religious system of their day. Last week, Troy and Brett made this point in the feeding of the 5,000. I love the point that you guys said, you know, transformation requires our participation. Sometimes, you know, you want to see people transformed, you want to see lives changed, but we want to be a part of it. We have to be a part of it if our hearts are going to be changed. So that's the lesson of the 5 loaves and 2 fish. And this lesson basically said, when we finally realize that we're not enough, that's when we become more than enough. 5 loaves, 2 fish, 5,000, I don't have enough resource. You feed them. No way. I don't have enough. Right answer. But then when you realize that, all of a sudden, many great things can happen. That's the lesson. It's not just about feeding the 5,000. It's about this idea of community. Jesus' disciples are learning to let go of the law mentality and to embrace a new kingdom culture of understanding. When we don't have enough, he has plenty. We offer what we have. He multiplies it as we share collectively. This story, the water walking story, is not meant to show that Jesus is an all-powerful water walker. It's meant to show us that Jesus is instituting something new and understanding in our culture, which sets us free. He wants us to picture Jesus walking on the water toward us when we're weary. So every time we imagine this, I want us to realize we're loved, accepted, and free. So let me give you the first point. All that's introduction. We'll be out of here plenty before the next service. Number 1, there are times we need to withdraw and renew. I've shared this with some of you, some of my small group this week, but every day what I've discovered is that when I get up, I have about this much energy, mental energy in a day. You can say, well, I'm surprised you have that much. Some of you had this much. But let's say I had this much mental energy in a day. And I can spend it in a variety of ways. I can do some physical activity, and it takes a little bit of the mental energy, but not much. Sometimes physical energy helps keep it right where it is. And but if I have pain, some of it goes off, chronic pain. If I'm worried about something, if I have a heartache, it can drain away very quickly. Emotional energy is different from physical energy. Walking with people in their heartache takes energy. I've developed some very close personal friends over the years, and some of you are those close friends. This week, a friend of mine, Mitch Burks, some of you know Mitch Burks and his brother Matthew. I got a call from Mitch this week. Mitch was on our staff for 10 years, and he called and said, Larry, he said, I got to tell you, my mom died in a car wreck this week. And he was just devastated. And I know Jean Burks very well. She's 85 years old. She comes to Suncoast many, many, many times. I've known her for over 30 years. She's in good shape, even though she's 85. She drove a Class A motorhome from Louisiana to Tampa and back this summer. It's pretty good. But driving around town, we don't know the details of the accident, but there were 2 cars involved. One lady was airlifted and his mom was killed. And I said, I don't know what to say, except I'll cry with you for a minute on the phone. And I wept with him just a few minutes because Mitch, and I've known him for over 30 years. He's like a brother to me. His brother Matthew is an anesthesiologist in Tampa. As soon as I got done with Mitch, I called Matthew because he was here last week and spent hours with me. And I prayed for them and loved on them the best I knew how. They had their funeral yesterday. And I'm texting back and forth to see how things are going. It takes a certain amount of energy. After I get off the phone call, all of a sudden I go, my energy depleted from here down to about here. Yesterday, I went to visit someone who's part of our church community. She has inoperable brain tumor. And she was supposed to live 15 months. Now she's 3 years. And I was there with her daughter and her husband and her 2 granddaughters. She calls them her cherubs. A cherub is a word for angels. Her angels. These 6th graders were there. And I got to love on them a little bit and go in and pray with her because she's just on the verge between this life and the life beyond. And I walked out of that with tears, in my eyes and sat in my car for a few minutes before I could even drive and drove to a place just to say, I need to have a few minutes. And I have this system that I do. And all these prescriptions that I give you over the years, I practice those prescriptions. But I breathe in, breathe out, smile, and say, the Lord is my shepherd. And I talk to God for a few minutes and say, God, thank you for allowing me to be in the place where people are intersecting life and death. If there is a purpose in my life, this is one of the purposes. But I can tell you, I can do that a couple times, but I don't have this unlimited amount to do that. My emotional energy just goes down and down. See, what happens to us when our emotional energy, how do we renew that? And here's Jesus, and you see him repeatedly feeding 5,000. The emotional drain from teaching every week. I talked to Brett and Kevin and Troy about this too. Even Ricardo, he said, it's just exhausting. Most people don't know that when we're done here, we go home and take a nap. Why? Because we're exhausted. And say, well, that's good. Do you get a nap? Yeah. And Troy, you say, never takes naps. Now he came into the office and said, okay, I want to confess, I take naps now. But it's because he's giving out a lot of energy and a lot of emotional energy when that happens. So when we do that, Jesus gives us a pattern. Withdraw from it. You can't keep doing that all day, every day. And find a place to renew your life. Jesus did it. Moses did it. And we should do it. And it prompted me to think about all the things I want to do, but I don't have the emotional reservoir. I think that all the things I want to be true, what I really want is for everything to be great and for me to have endless energy. I don't have it. But I can tell you what I do have. I have a connection to this source that refuels my life every day. And guess what? If he does it for me, he'll do it for you. Say, what you don't understand, I do. And maybe what we need to do is set aside some time. And it doesn't have to be the first thing of the day. It could be before night. Just sometime you need to pull back and say, okay, the Lord is my shepherd. He is. And sometimes I need 4 or 5 of those. That's just at the traffic light at Clark. So then there's serious things we have to deal with. But all the things we want to do and all the things we want to be true. And there's things we want to wish were true about our lives. I believe there are people here today who really want to be the kind of mom or dad or husband or wife or friend who is a real source of strength and encouragement for a lifetime. That's what we want. I think that most people have a real desire to be closer to God than they are now. And they're confused because sometimes we've been taught a system. The same system that didn't work back then doesn't work today. That's when you try to externalize all the things you should do or shouldn't do, it usually doesn't work. It needs to start on the inside. But whatever it is that we want to do with our lives, or whatever we wish was true in our lives, we're usually, when we have those thoughts, we're taking a few steps in the right direction. I want to tell you what I found true in my own experience. I want to experience more, and I find the greatest source of strength is in him. But what keeps me from getting that is fear, which leads to the second point. Fear of the unknown is calmed when we realize that God is in the boat of our lives. I've been to the Sea of Galilee many times, about 8 miles wide, about 13 miles long. It's a big lake. It's not salt water, it's fresh water. It's a big lake. But they're rowing up this big lake, and they're fatigued, and it's dark, and the storm blows in, and the waves get there. And if you've ever been out in a rowboat or any kind of boat, and the wind is against you, you're in trouble. It doesn't, even in a kayak, it's difficult. In these other stories, the parallel narratives, the disciples are terrified, the storm gets high, Jesus is asleep on the boat, all these different stories. But here's the commonality: fear, anxiety, terror. When John uses this word, this is a clue to John, is the word darkness. When he uses the word darkness, it describes a place that is distant from the very light of God. And what other darkness, fears come in the darkness, would be what I think John is trying to help us understand. Jesus was teaching his disciples that the disciples would face darkness or fears in the coming years. And they're going to be confronted not by those overt things, not about their spiritual lives or their trust in Jesus, but by the religious authorities. Can you imagine coming out and saying, we really want to be all for God the best we can be, and your worst enemy are the other religious groups in town? It's the system. The system provokes fear and wants to eliminate competition. In the religious system, it seems that most people want to validate their fears by instilling fear in others. I'm afraid, and I feel better about myself if I make you afraid. Was your religious system that you grew up with, was it based on fear? Some of you go, yeah, it doesn't matter. Mine was. I remember an evangelist, which is a preacher that come for a week, and I may have told you this, but he comes and he tells us about eternity. He said, can you imagine a little sparrow going to the beach and picking up one grain of sand and flying all the way around the world and dropping it right back in the same spot, and doing that for every grain of sand on every beach in the world? And when he's finished with that, that's the beginning of eternity. And that's how long you're going to burn in hell. That didn't scare the hell out of you. I don't know what would. I mean, you're going to be separated. And that's a long time. I'm only 13 or 14 years old. I'm thinking this is like, more than 10 years. It's a long time. Fear has been the trademark of religion and the church. It has been thousands of years ago, and it's still part of the trademark, unfortunately, today. And Jesus rebukes their fear. But some people like being afraid. Do you like being afraid? Some people like being scared. If you do, on October 22nd, Escape the Woods comes to Suncoast. We do that every year. It's a promo for it. It's middle schoolers and high schoolers, and around on our property, they take them on a hayride, and middle schoolers are just scared out of their minds. I remember a few years ago going with this middle schooler, a little girl, and she was sitting beside me holding my arm, and I was on there, I didn't know who she was. She said, I'm so scared, And there are people in the dark with white faces, it's that kind of scared, just spooky alien type stuff. And she said, I'm scared 50 times. And I remember thinking, man, this little girl should not be on this. My dadhood, my grandfather's side kicked in. I said, we got to change this. And I said, it's okay, hold on, Mom, I'm so sorry. And she cried and screamed, I want to be back, I want to go back. We finally got back. I thought, this is crazy. And then she looked at me, she said, can I do it again? And they go through it again, I mean, Busch Gardens, Hallow Scream, Universal, Halloween Horror Nights. Do people really like to be afraid? Mitch Burks, my friend I was talking about a few minutes ago. Mitch is martial arts expert, concealed weapon, tough guy. If you ever want to have a guy with you in a fight, he's the guy. I mean, tough. I remember going on a retreat with him years ago on the Suwannee River up in North Florida. And we walked this place we were staying down this little path toward the river. And we took a wrong path. It was just him and I, and it was dark. We didn't have lights. And all of a sudden, I said, look, we'll just follow the path. And we got down, and all of a sudden, wait, did you hear that? It's like a raccoon or something. He was absolutely terrified. I don't know what to do. What am I going to do? They're going to get us. And I finally said, Mitch, do you like scary movies? He goes, I love them. You need to quit watching those movies, man. They're not good for you. I don't like scary movies. I'm scared enough as it is. But here's what Jesus is trying to help us. Do not be afraid. I am is in the boat of my life. What a realization. You don't have to go through life wanting to be afraid or scared for any reason. God is with us, which leads to the last truth today, and it's this. When we are bewildered or have lost our way, keep searching for the one who gives life meaning. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they said, Rabbi, when did you get here? He said, very truly, I tell you, you're looking for me, not because you saw the signs that I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. What are you really saying? You're not following me because these life lessons are so profound, but because you had a free meal. So my question today is, for what are you looking? Why are we searching? Is it for a free meal? Is it for some heavenly gift that God's going to give us? Or are you looking for meaning that can be in your life? John wants us to search for the source of life, which Jesus embodies. Years ago, in the middle of the night, I got up and wrote this quote. I have these things that come in my head, and I have a legal pad by my bed last night, and often I get up and I write this stuff down. And that helps me go back to sleep. But this is what I wrote down. It's not what's in front of you that blocks your way. It's what's inside you that holds you back. I thought, that's worth writing down. See, we often blame the weather. I missed the boat. I don't have the finances. I don't have the time for that. But it's not what's in front of us that keeps us from being where we should be. It's what's inside of us. What is that? Fear. This story emphasizes renewing of energy, the presence of God in the storm, inviting Jesus into the boat of your life, which I think is outrageous because he already is in the boat of my life and he's in the boat of your life. Just being aware of that. I love my Thursday morning group. A lot of you guys go to the Thursday morning group. It's at 6:30 a.m., really early. The guys there are mostly dysfunctional. Just the ones that are here. But it's not a story-oriented group. It's more about support and building relationships. So what's going on, Pete? What's going on, Scott? I mean, these are right here. What's going on in your life, Charles? I mean, we talk about what's going on. And as we do that, we begin to talk about it. And next week, people say, how's that going? There's a little bit of follow-up, right, Johnny? I mean, there's something that happens, and there's a brotherhood that's created. And part of it is we begin to talk about it, and then we do something about it. See, there's no shortage of great things that God wants to do. There's just a shortage of people who will be aware and invite Jesus or have their eyes open to Jesus being the boat of their life. Life is about taking risk. There's an old expression. He was swimming with one foot on the bottom. You know what that means? He never really was in deep water. He's acting like he's swimming, but he's in the shallow end, and he's still got 1 foot on the water, on the bottom. You know, that's the way we live. But taking a risk is simply inviting the presence of Christ to so fill me and live within me that I begin to make a difference in the world around me. Today, let's open our eyes and realize Jesus is here. Let's take some risks. What's the risk? Begin to live from the inside out. Let me pray for you. Father, thank you for this story today and for the teachings of Christ. It's my prayer that this will be applied to our lives, that when we leave here, we realize that Christ always has been in the boat of our life. May we be aware of it. May we live into it. May we lean into it. And may our life reflect you, we pray in Christ's name. Amen. Would you stand, please? I'm going to tell you a story in closing. I went to a college in Nashville. It was called Tribeca. And I not only went there for 4 years, I was part of the church group that went there. And I went there many, many, many times over the years. When Ryan, my son, who's now in his mid-30s, when he was about 9 years old, we went back to campus, and I knew so many people. I knew the professors. I knew, some students. And one day as we were walking across campus, I see other parents that I know that were students when I was there. And I'd say, how you doing? Hey, what's going on? Ryan's with me. He's 9. How you doing? Good to see you. Hey, Charles, good to see you. It's so good to see you. And I'd talk to him a few minutes. Finally, after about 2 or 3 of those, he goes, Dad, you know everybody. Would you please just stop? This is terrible. I want to leave. I don't want to be with this whole thing. And I thought, in a moment of inspiration, I thought about changing his attitude of agony and adversity to opportunity. So I looked at Ryan, 9 years old. I said, Ryan, you want to make some money? He said, sure. How? I said, for every person I introduce you to, if you respond this way, I'll give you a quarter. Back then, a quarter was worth something. Says, what I'm going to say is, this is my son, Ryan, and you have to do these three things. You have to look them in the eye, you shake their hand, and say, it's nice to meet you. That's it. Look them in the eye, shake their hand, it's nice to meet you, and cha-ching, 25 cents. So at the first with 25 cents, he did it like a charm. The second was 2 people. He said, I get double for 2 people, 50 cents. He, cha-ching, cha-ching. It was within about 2 minutes, he goes, do you know them? Do you know them? Do you know them? Do you know them? And finally, I saw the president of the university coming across campus, and I was a friend of mine. I said, Dr. Reed's coming this way. I said, Ryan, this is a 50-center. I want you to know. So Ryan walked up, and he said, oh, Larry, how you doing? I said, it's good to see you, Dr. Reed. This is my son, Ryan. Ryan, it's nice to meet you, Dr. Reed. Like that. And I mean, he just went, impressive. So impressive. So here's what's interesting. You take something that's an adversity. You take something and twist it around and change your perspective, and it becomes an opportunity. Today, your Heavenly Father wants to live in your life. If we could just learn to let go of the agony, the adversity, and see the opportunities, I think God would be honored. He loves you today. So do I. God bless. Thanks for coming.